Hi there guys, what's going on? Welcome to this video. So today I wanted to talk about how to look like Steve Reeves. So we're gonna start with aesthetics. What's aesthetics? Because Steve Reeves, was known to be the god of aesthetics for a natural bodybuilder back in the 50s. I will explain as well Steve Reeves, who was this guy, was he natural, etc. And so we're gonna start with aesthetics. What do aesthetics means in bodybuilding? So aesthetics means having a very proportional, pleasant physique to look at. So broad shoulders, tight waist, and back in the days you could have Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, Frank Zane. All these guys, old school bodybuilders, were known usually for their aesthetics, despite being mass monsters. So nowadays we could say, for example, that it's not really the case anymore. In modern bodybuilding, a lot of people are complaining that this is all about the mass monsters. So I think most people do know what aesthetics means, but I think it's good to explain as well for the video. I can give some examples. So we're not debating here if these people, some of them are natural or not. I just think that these people are known for aesthetics. So it's a good example to show. So in the fitness industry, you could have people, like I said, like Arnold Schwarzenegger as a pretty much a mass monster, good aesthetics, Frank Zane. We have, Jeff Said, Conor Murphy, David Laid. These kind of guys are showing aesthetics because they've got wide shoulders and while having, a tight waist. You also have Serge Nubret, which I personally like as a bodybuilder. So now the question is there a way to train for aesthetics? Can you get them? So in my opinion, you can actually reach aesthetics. Of course, genetics are different for some people. Some people will have broader shoulders and a tight waist naturally, and others, for example, they will have whatever, big legs but not a good upper body. They'll have a good chest but very narrow shoulders. They might not be given this natural aesthetics genetics, but I think nothing is impossible. We all have strong parts and weak parts in our bodies. But the truth is, if you can recognize the strong and weak parts, you should be able to do well. Once you understand your body morphology better, you will be able to work with the right exercises and actually build a good physique. And if your goal is to have, the aesthetic physique, you will be able to get this type of physique. So this is what people in classic physique, for example, aim to do. They're trying to not become the biggest guy. Of course, in every category you have to have the great proportions, but classic physique is really representing this aesthetics that we're talking about right now. They're really trying to have this tight waist and broad shoulders, and they're really going for the details. They're not trying to be the biggest possible, but they're trying to build muscle where it needs to be built. So I think they have a good understanding of what their body morphology is to work the weaknesses and maybe not as much the strong parts, so they can have a proportional body. Some people will say they want to actually work even harder on their strong parts because weaknesses are sometimes hard to bring back, and so some people might as well say, well, I'm just gonna go full on my strong parts so they're even more visible. But that all depends from people. But the point is that you have to know your body morphology better, and from there you can actually have the good exercise selection, work on the right things to actually get this aesthetic body. It will probably take you a bit of time to actually realize what your weaknesses and your strong parts are, because if you're starting and you're a beginner, then you haven't built enough mass to actually see what's lacking, what's not. So if you're a beginner, give yourself some time. You have to build the basics anyway, the base, so you can't, already want this aesthetic physique. It takes, a bit of time. So you first have to build some basics, build some mass, and then once you get to intermediate level, you can see what you need to do more, etc. What if you don't even have the right genetics for at all for bodybuilding, and that you don't, you can't reach this aesthetics, etc. If you one day want to compete in classic, etc. Well, you can actually try to be a bit smart about how you're gonna present yourself. So for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger was always doing these kind of poses with his biceps where he was kind of hiding his stomach because his abs probably weren't good enough. And so you can actually try to find ways to impress the judges in another way if you don't have fully the right genetics in some areas of your body, and you can actually just try to find ways to actually please the judges, etc. So I just wanted to say that quickly because it just goes well with the video, but let's carry on with aesthetics. So Steve Reeves is the perfect example for any natural bodybuilder. I think a lot of natural bodybuilders who want to reach his physique one day. We're gonna try to analyze his physique and see how we can build the same type of physique, and if not, still build a kind of same size as he did. So the big question is, was Steve Reeves natural or not? So I think it was natural, or at least I think it is reachable naturally. We'll never exactly know, but I do think looking at the guy, looking at his interviews, the way he talks, he just doesn't really seem like he wanted to, you know, poison himself with PDs or take any sort of risk. So for sure, when you look at his stats, you know, his arms, etc., and how lean he was, sometimes with these kind of numbers, you can, you know, wonder if he wasn't, for example, taking, you know, his biceps measurement with a tape that was a bit loose. But honestly, that's totally possible. You know, like, this guy trained super hard, and maybe he was just really good genetics as well, or, you know, gifted to actually reach this type of level. But I definitely trust that you can reach this naturally. So if you can already reach a small version of Steve Reeves, it's already a very good accomplishment. So Steve Reeves had, you know, broad shoulders, he had a very nice back. His chest wasn't that developed, but it really goes with the aesthetic physique where your shoulders are very broad, and you don't want your chest to be too big, so, you know, it still gives this impression that your shoulders are very big. He had a very narrow waist, and so he was really going with this V-taper shape with his very broad shoulders and back. So his arms were just very good as well, very big arms, but not too much. Like, he wasn't, you know, standing out that his arms were too big for the rest of his bodies. So I would say his arms were good, his chest was good, his shoulders and back were exceptional, and his waist was incredibly well. For his legs, well, it was just good. You don't want to have legs that are way too big. This is what we would find in golden era days, where they actually had usually legs that weren't that huge, just that it looks nice with the rest of the body. Now we'll talk about the program that Steve Reeves was following. So I found this on the internet, and I think it was, you know, pretty accurate because he's been writing a book, and I think this comes from the book. So first I wanted to show this first picture of Steve Reeves doing incline curls. So that's, you know, an old bench there, and, you know, this is not like what we can find today, but he was still doing incline curls. And I just want to say that this is probably one of the best exercises for your biceps, because it really stretches, because your arms are backwards, and so you're really stretching here the biceps, and you're really isolating them. So very good exercise, probably one of the best for biceps. I would advise you to do it. And so even Steve Reeves was doing it, as you can see in this example. So Steve Reeves really thought that resting was important, and it is. And I'm gonna, you know, show his program. I'm gonna see what I think could have been different, and I'm gonna explain as well why there is actually no such thing as a perfect program in bodybuilding, and that, you know, Steve Reeves was doing full body, but that can work. You know, like, at the end of the day, there is no program that is said not to work, and I will explain you why in this video. I think as long as you follow the right principles and the right basics of training, then you can actually do any program. As long as you respect a few rules, then you can actually get with anything, because people are always fighting, should I do full body, should I do, you know, half body, should I do a split every day? And the truth is that you can do anything as long as you respect these rules that I will explain. So here is the program of Steve Reeves. He was doing a day one basically, which was military press, then he was doing bent over rows, then bench press, standing calf raises, Romanian deadlift, crunches, parallel squats, full squats, barbell curls, and triceps extensions. Then on day two, he was doing deadlifts, then he was doing barbell military presses, then he was doing parallel bar dips, and then he was doing dumbbell curls alternating, seated curl raises, triceps extension and bench press, pull-ups, front squats, back raises, barbell lunges, and hanging leg raises. And on his third day, he was doing deadlifts, one-arm dumbbell rows, upright rows, incline presses, standing calf raises, front squats, glute raises, sit-ups, dumbbell lunges, lying triceps extensions, and concentration curls. So I'm sure a lot of natural bodybuilders who are at an advanced level could say, well, you can actually do more once you're at an advanced level as a natural bodybuilder than Steve Reeves was doing. But Steve Reeves was actually training in a way that he was going very intense in his sessions. He was not taking much rest, apparently. He was really getting in the zone where he was in like trance. That's what he described. You know, he was really trying to get in the zone, and there was nothing else when he was working out. He wasn't taking much rest. He was going very, very intense, and so there was still a lot of volume to take, you know, trying to go very intensely. So in the end, you could actually say that even though 3 times a week like this might not seem like a lot of work, it was actually a lot of work, you know, because of the way he was training and the intensity. For sure, when you look at his program, you could have actually split it in 5 or 6 days, but he preferred to do 3 very intense sessions with quite a lot of volume, and to rest in between those days and do some, you know, power walking, like he explains. He liked to walk with weights. So now I want to come back to the rules that you need to follow as a bodybuilder or natural bodybuilder. And with these rules, you can actually do any program. You could do half body, you know, upper, lower. You could do full body workout. You can do splits 7 days a week. Like, as long as you follow these rules, there is no problem. And, you know, this comes back to say this is just about, you know, doing the right diet, eating enough, and, you know, following the principles of progressive overload. But how do you do this? So you have to understand your current level of fitness bodybuilding. Some, you know, beginners, for example, will train 3-4 times a week. Well, it's totally enough as a beginner. Like, you don't need more. Like, this is already enough stress for your body to grow. If you're doing more than 3-4 times a week as a beginner, you're probably gonna burn out. Or then you have to do, you know, 5-6 times a week, but the volume for each session has to be, you know, much less. So you always have to train accordingly to your current level of fitness bodybuilding. So if you're, for example, on, you know, 10 times 50 kg on the bench press, well, you're probably a beginner in terms of bodybuilding. I'm not talking, you know, powerlifting, etc. In terms of bodybuilding, you're still a beginner, and so you want to train, you know, like a beginner does. You don't want to train 7 times a week like someone in, you know, more advanced would do. So look at your lifts, understand your current level, and if you feel like you're in the beginner range, then, you know, 3-4 times a week before you actually get to higher numbers. For example, on the bench we said 10 times 50 kg. If one day you get to 10 times 90 kg, well, you kind of, you know, intermediate now, and you might want to jump to you know, 5 times a week, 6 times a week, and actually train accordingly to your current level of bodybuilding. The second thing that you must follow is, you know, have the right exercise selection for your body morphology. So train 3-4 times a week as a beginner, get to an intermediate level, see how your body looks like, see what parts are, you know, better than others, etc. Understand your body morphology and choose the right exercises from now on, so you don't risk injuries, and so you're actually developing the muscles in the best way possible with exercises which are adapted to your body morphology. Understand what your diet should be for your current level. So are you really overweight? And so maybe you might, you know, want to shred down a bit as you're training, or are you, you know, very lean and maybe you need to start bulking up a little bit to increase, you know, just to have more energy to train and to actually start bulking up, etc. So just like before, you have to understand what your diet should be for the body type that you have at the moment. Any training routine, as long as it's done smartly, so, you know, don't do shoulders, for example, and triceps the day before chest if you want to grow your chest, or don't do biceps the day before back if you want to grow your back. These are, like, you know, smart things that you need to do. Seek progression and stick to your routine. You'll become very good at what you do the most. You know, force it. Don't change your routine every now and then, because if you keep changing, you're always going to lose what you acquired once, and then you have to restart, because it's not just, because a lot of exercises are also about, you know, neurological adaptation. So if you keep changing, you're actually never going to improve. Some people talk about shocking the muscle, etc. This is absolute bullshit. What you want to do is stick at your routine so you can actually improve. You know, we said practice makes good, so you have to practice the movements the most possible to actually improve on them and actually have a reason for your muscles to grow. That's why powerlifters always stick to these 3 exercises: bench press, squat, and deadlift. They actually want to get very good at them, and it's the same in bodybuilding, but we're just doing some different rep ranges where you actually try to do hypertrophy training and build muscle. So here what you want to do is really to stick to the same exercises. So what matters really is progression. There are many ways to do it, and Steve Reeves decided to do it with full body workouts, and I was fine because he respected all the other rules that I just said. So Steve Reeves was probably a fan of the mind-muscle connection. So in my opinion, the mind-muscle sometimes is just over-exaggerated in a way that people are, like, so strict in their forms that in the end they don't even progress anymore. Like, sometimes you also have to force it a little bit. You can cheat as long as you cheat within the right, you know, the right rules. So for example, if you're doing a rows, well, as long as you're kind of like cheating, but you're cheating in a way that your shoulder blades are still retracted, that your chest is still out, then that's fine. But if you start cheating with a round back, then that's a mistake. So you can cheat a little bit as long as you're still having basically the basics of the movements which are right. And I think what really matters at the end of the day, again, is stick to your routine and stick to you know, the way you train all the time. So Steve Reeves was maybe, you know, someone doing very strict form, etc. But each workout he would actually do the exact same tempo, etc. And so he was sticking to the same things, and he was allowing progression because he was, you know, practicing all the time the same things. Some people, for example, I talked about forced reps in another video, where you decide to ask someone to spot you on the bench, and someone will help you much, you know, easier than other people, and you're actually never doing the exact same thing each session, and so you don't have landmarks. You don't know. it's very hard to measure basically what you're doing, and this is why, you know, when you do programs, you have to write everything down so you know exactly what to beat the next time, etc. And so here is the same thing, you know, Steve Reeves was just sticking to his routine all the time. He was sticking to the same type of training. He was doing maybe his very strict forms, but each time he would go work out, he would do the exact same strict forms, and so he'd exactly know what to beat next time, etc. He had his power drink that he was eating twice a day. So his power drink was basically some sort of, you know, shake, I guess I would say today. Some dirty thing that he wanted to get the calories in. So that's the example of what he was taking. So he was consistent with his diet and he knew what to expect from it. So his diet mostly consisted in eating 60% of carbs, 20% of fat and protein respectively. It's not what most of the natural bodybuilders will do these days, but that worked for him. And to be honest, high protein plans are often overrated nowadays in the fitness industry. The most important is to understand the calorie surplus deficit and be pretty moderate in terms of, you know, the nutrients repartition. And we could take a guess that for a 100 kg guy, you would need, you know, a good 2,500, 3,000 daily calorie intake. Steve Reeves was probably not counting his macros, and if he did so, he would, you know, then stick to the same diet as seen above. And when you stick to your diet like you stick to your program, it's easier to have landmarks and know what you're doing if you want to start cutting. So just, you know, you just have to try and burn more calories by training more intensely than usual. I think Steve Reeves wasn't probably, I didn't see this that he was counting his calories or anything like this, but if he always was eating the same thing, it's like he's eating the same calories all the time. So he actually knows, he just has to like kind of lower, you know, his calories if he wants to cut and then up them again. Steve Reeves would mention he would go for more intense sessions in times he needed to cut, and that, you know, he would do more power walking. So that makes sense. You know, if he was sticking to the exact same diet, calories intake stayed the same, he would then just have to do more intense sessions to start seeing cutting results. So now here is an example of Steve Reeves' training program that we're gonna modify a bit so you can actually do it whatever your level is, because you can't follow just someone else's program like this. Mostly if you're a beginner, you might, you know, want to modify it a bit. So I'm gonna give it a modified program for 3 categories, which is beginner, intermediate and advanced. Something similar to Steve Reeves. So here, as to proceed, you know, answer these few questions. What level are you at now, and how many hours a week are you comfortable training at for your level? From there, you know, whether you decide you're a beginner, intermediate or advanced, you can follow Steve Reeves' aesthetic training workout programs as following. So for beginners, so if you're starting, a full body program like Steve Reeves can be good. Try and start by doing, you know, 2 sets instead of 3 like he was doing in his program. This should shorten your session and not put too much pressure as someone who is starting. Stay within the 8 to 12 reps as in the program. Make sure you are learning the movement well, and if this feels like too much, reduce the overall volume. Go to 1 set. The goal really is to get used to it until you can become an intermediate. If you're an intermediate, you know, respect the same principles just like for beginners. If you feel like it, you can gradually increase. You know, go for it. As an intermediate, you might know yourself better and your body better, so try and see what exercises might fit you best than the ones explained in Steve Reeves' routine. Keep the same training scheme, but modify exercises if you think some will benefit you better, or if some exercises were hurting you. For advanced, you can try the program as it is, but feel free to modify exercises which you think won't benefit you or that have shown in the past not to be good for you at an advanced level. You surely know what kind of body morphology you have. You have to find the most efficient exercises for your body shape to train smartly and most efficiently. If Steve Reeves' program is not enough, feel free to make it more intense, add a few sets. Alternatively, you know, switch to a 5-day split routine and try to keep some similarities with Steve Reeves' program. So basically, you're just, you know, using Steve Reeves' program but adapting it to your level. So for beginners, I said that you're doing, you know, less sets than it is for you know, what Steve Reeves was doing. If you're intermediate, you can kind of do the same program, but, you know, do it according to your body morphology. Don't do exactly what he was doing. Do the same scheme, you know, the same type of program that he was doing, but adapt it to who you are. And as an advanced level, it's exactly the same. And, you know, if it just doesn't go well for you, then just do whatever you want to do that will be best for you. As well, Steve Reeves was always within the, you know, 8 to 12 rep range. Well, if you want to do more strength program, then you can as well. But what I'm saying is that you can do a full body and still improve as long as, you know, you're eating enough, doing progressive overload and eating enough, then that should be fine. So that was it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have more questions, then feel free to comment and I will help you. That was a bit of a long video, so I want to short it now. Yeah, I will see you next time.